The 1970s were known as the golden age of serial killers in the U.S. Among them was one in particular, seeking notoriety. He was John Knowles, often called PJK, but later dubbed the Casanova Killer. PJK was an American serial killer tied to the deaths of 18 people in 1974, though he claimed to have murdered 35.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
John Knowles was born on April 25, 1946, in Orlando, Florida, to a family of 7 living in 3 rooms, according to Knowles' brother Clifton. Clifton admits that physical abuse occurred and that PJK spent time in foster care. PJK was sent to the Dozier School for Boys, also known as the Florida State School for Boys, at some point before being incarcerated for the first time at the age of 19. He met Angela Kovic whilst in prison in 1974 when they became pen pals. He pretended to be in prison for a drug offense, but he was actually there for burglary. Angela was married at the time, but her marriage was rocky, and the two began a romantic relationship right away. They eventually got engaged, and she paid for his legal counsel, and upon his release, PJK flew directly to California to be with her, but the wedding was called off. After the Casanova Killer's release, Kovic reportedly visited a psychic who advised her to avoid a new man in her life. During this psychic reading, Knowles was described as dangerous, which is an understatement. Kovic took this advice. Alice Curtis, a 65-year-old retired schoolteacher, was PJK's first known murder victim. He broke into her house, tied her up, and went through her belongings the night he escaped. Due to being gagged, she choked to death on her own dentures. PJK stole some money from her as well as her car before fleeing. He drove the stolen car for a few days before realizing he had to abandon it because both of them were wanted by the police. Her son discovered Alice Curtis's body the next morning. At the scene, no prints were discovered. On August 2nd, in Atlantic Beach, Florida, PJK met Marjorie Howie, 49. Her television set was stolen and she was found strangled in her apartment. On August 23rd, PJK broke into Kathy Sue Pierce's home in Mucellus, Georgia. He strangled Kathy but did not harm her 3-year-old son. William Bates, a 32-year-old man, was seen with a redhead man at Scott's Inn, a roadside pub near Lima, Ohio, on September 3, 1974. Bates was reported missing by his wife. Police discovered Alice Curtis' vehicle abandoned near the bar, but Bates' vehicle was missing. Bates' naked body was discovered in October. He'd been strangled and abandoned in the woods. On September 18, 1974, while driving Bates' car, PJK bound and killed 2 elderly campers, Emmett and Lois Johnson, at a rest stop near Ely, Nevada. PJK came across stranded motorcyclist Charlene Hicks in Seguin, Texas on September 21, 1974. He abducted and raped her after stopping and offering to help her, then strangled her with her own pantyhose and dragged her body through a barbed wire fence while hiding it. A few days later, her body was discovered. On September 23, in Birmingham, Alabama, PJK appears to have met Beautician Ann Dawson. It is unclear whether he abducted her or she willingly traveled with him, but she paid the bills while they were together. PJK claimed that on September 29, 1974, he murdered Dawson and threw her body into the Mississippi River. Her body was never found. Karen Wine and her 16-year-old daughter, Dawn, were bound, raped, and strangled on October 16, 1974, after their Marlborough, Connecticut, home was broken into. Only a tape recorder was discovered missing from their home. Authorities believe PJK committed the crime. On October 18, 1974, 53-year-old Doris Hosey was shot to death with her husband's rifle. The gun was placed beside her body. In Key West, Florida, PJK picked up two hitchhikers and was stopped by a police officer. The officer let him go with a warning. At the time, he was driving the car stolen from victim William Bates. After being shaken by the experience, PJK dropped off the hitchhikers in Miami, Florida without causing them any harm. Around this time, PJK had recorded taped confessions to crimes and mailed them to a Florida lawyer, Sheldon Yavitz. Edward Hillard and Debbie Griffin vanished while hitchhiking near Macon on November 2nd. Hillard's body was discovered in nearby woods, but Griffin was never discovered. PJK is said to be a suspect in their murders. On November 6th, Knowles befriended Carswell Carr in Milledgeville, Georgia, and was invited back to Carr's house to spend the night. He stabbed Carr to death and strangled Amanda, Carr's 15-year-old daughter. Carswell Carr had been stripped naked and stabbed nearly 27 times with scissors, bleeding through the mattress. It is unclear whether his death was caused by the stab wounds or a heart attack. Amanda Carr was strangled with stockings, and another pair was discovered in her mouth. PJK met British journalist Sandy Fox in Atlanta on November 8th. Fox described him as a cross between Robert Redford and Ryan O'Neal in terms of appearance. The couple spent the next few days together, but Fox claimed PJK couldn't perform when they tried to have sex. They split up on November 10th. The next day, Knowles kidnapped one of Fox's acquaintances, Susan McKenzie, and demanded sex from her at gunpoint. She managed to flee and alerted the authorities. When patrolmen attempted to apprehend him, PJK brandished a sawed-off shotgun and fled. Days later, in West Palm Beach, Florida, he broke into Beverly Mabby's home, abducting her sister, Barbara Mabby Abel, and stealing their car. He then fled to Fort Pierce, Florida, where he arrived the next night. Barbara later revealed in her book One Survivor that she was raped during her captivity before Knowles released her. Trooper Charles Eugene Campbell of the Florida Highway Patrol recognized a stolen car near Perry, Florida, on November 16th. During an arrest attempt, PJK was able to wrestle the officer's pistol away from him and drive away in the patrol car, holding Campbell hostage. PJK then used the police siren to stop a 29-year-old motorist named James Meyer, and both hostages were placed in Meyer's car. PJK led the two men into a wooded area in Pulaski County, Georgia, and handcuffed them to a tree before shooting them in the head. Shortly after, he crashed through a police roadblock in Henry County, Georgia, eluding capture and firing shots at the pursuing officers. During his escape, PJK was shot in the foot by Chief Detective Philip S. Howard, and Officer Jerry Key was injured when PJK's stolen car collided with his patrol car. A chaotic foot race ensued, with PJK being pursued by dogs, officers from multiple agencies, and helicopters. On November 17th, PJK was cornered by David Clark, a 27-year-old Vietnam War veteran and hospital maintenance worker who was armed with a shotgun. Paul Robbins and Billy Payne of Henry County arrived on the scene and arrested and handcuffed PJK. He was outside the perimeter set up for the manhunt and would have escaped if it hadn't been for the actions of the locals. On December 18, 1974, Sheriff Earl Lee and Georgia Bureau of Investigation Agent Ronnie Angel were driving down Interstate 20 with PJK handcuffed in the back seat. Their destination was Henry County, Georgia, where PJK admitted to dumping a handgun he had taken from Florida State Trooper Charles Eugene Campbell after killing him with it, according to a Georgia GBI press release. PJK grabbed Lee's handgun, discharging it through the holster in the process, and while Lee was struggling with PJK and attempting to keep control of the vehicle, Angel fired 3 shots into PJK's chest, killing him instantly, according to the GBI.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.